Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study. And before we begin, looking again at 2 Samuel chapter 15, let's have a word of prayer. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we invite you into our midst, that through thy Spirit you can speak to our hearts and minds and those that are watching on YouTube. We know, Lord, that you have a purpose for each one of us, and that you have created us in a particular way and brought us through a particular experience, that your name may be glorified upon the earth. So we submit our lives to you and ask that you can work through us and use us, and that as we study your word, that we will be strengthened, that our minds will be enlightened, and that we can be encouraged as we go through these final events of Earth's history. So be with us now in this study. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, good morning, everyone. So before we started recording here, Stephen and I were having a conversation, a few different conversations, I guess. But the one thing of note is that we have, at this time, two issues being agitated in social media within the Christian circles. One is the Sabbath, because of Charlie Kirk's book, In the Name of God, dealing with the Sabbath. And then also a Christian actor, Kirk Cameron, has taken publicly the view of, I guess you could call it annihilationism or conditionalism, which is bringing to light again the book by Edward Fudge, The Fire That Consumes, and then there's a movie out too called something in Mr. Fudge. I can't remember what that title of the movie is. But it's just interesting at this time that these two great errors are being agitated. So it's something that, of course, every Adventist should be thankful for and take the opportunity to have these discussions with people in a Christ-like way. Unfortunately, there are many Adventists who are doing a lot of damage in how they're dealing with the issue, especially with Charlie Kirk, with some of their the Hell in Mr. Fudge, as Steve says, is the name of the movie. So we can see that people are going to be making choices as these issues arise. And so it's pretty clear that we're in end time events that we have long prayed about as Seventh-day Adventists. Now, any thoughts about any of that by anybody before we get into our study?
Well, exactly what is it that Cameron is advocating, and what is this other book advocating?
Okay, so the book, The Fire That Consumes?
Yeah.
So that is a book by a Baptist minister. I read it. I studied it in university back in 1995. It was a new book at that time, 1995, 1994. My professor, Dr. Russell Nelson, he recommended that I read the book because he knew that it aligned with my views as a Seventh-day Adventist. And we were doing a course on intertestamental literature. And so Edward Fudge goes through a lot of intertestamental literature showing that the Jews never did teach an immortal soul, and that view came in much later. And the idea of consciousness after death was not a Jewish idea. So it's teaching what we believe about the state of the dead, and that this actor, Kirk Cameron, has publicly on his social media platform, whatever he uses, I'm not sure whether it's YouTube or whatever, but is made a public stand for the idea that the wicked are not tortured forever in eternity, but that they are destroyed, and that this is more consistent with God's character. And so that's agitating a discussion regarding the state of the dead. At the same time, we have this discussion regarding the Sabbath. Now, the thing about, just as a side note, which I mentioned, but Edward Fudge mentions Leroy Froome's The Conditionalist Faith of Our Fathers, but comments about Froome's misuse of sources. I'd actually had AI do some research into that, because back when I read Movement of Destiny by Froome, I'd noticed his misuse of sources in regard to statements that he claimed were Ellen White was making about A.T. Jones, but they weren't about A.T. Jones at all. They were about his opponents, disparage Jones' character, and then also his mistreatment of the book Christ in Our Righteousness, or The Righteousness of Christ, or Christ in His Righteousness. 3 different titles that E.J. Wagner's book had. But anyway, in that book, he tries to have Wagner teaching that Jesus was. He's trying to get him supporting the new view of the Trinity that Froome was pushing. And so I noticed this back, 1980, 85, 84, when I read Movement of Destiny. So AI did some research on that and showed where Froome had misused the quotes regarding Jones, and also basically misused Wagner's book. So anyway, that's kind of an aside about Froome. But anyway, yeah, we have these 2 great errors being agitated at this time. So I find that pretty interesting.
Yeah, and just the initials, Charlie Kirk, CK, and then Kirk Cameron, KC.
Yeah. Yeah, a mirror, right?
Also, be aware that with Kirk Cameron, it's interesting because he was very much an atheist initially and then became a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So his stands for Christianity have led to situations where, as an actor, he's not being offered roles because they find him to be too controversial.
Yeah, and there is a difference between, somebody who's raised in a Christian tradition and just kind of accepts things, or somebody who's searching and finds truth, that they're going to often be a bit more open to truth, and especially somebody who's had to stand up for truth. So there's a part of his character, obviously, there that has allowed him to make this stand publicly, where some people would be. I know with Edward Fudge, it was pretty difficult for him taking that stand against what he was being taught as I think he was being trained as a minister in a seminary, I believe. I know he was in university or college or something at the time when he took the view that he did regarding the state of the dead and annihilationism. But people are going to have to make a stand despite of how they're affected. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the next few years how things unfold. Okay, so no other thoughts on that at all? Yeah, it's just an interesting world we live in. Okay, so in this study, we had dealt with Absalom's conspiracy, and let me see, what was the... So we had been dealing with these symbols. Now, we talked at the beginning or sometime during the study on Thursday regarding David fleeing Jerusalem. Was he doing the right thing at the time? And Dwight expressed an opinion which I disagreed with. So it's clear that he came into a situation where that shouldn't have existed. So because of David's sin, and because of his inability to deal with, because of his sin, it affected his ability to address sin, and not just the sin of Amnon, but also the sin of Absalom, right? So David had become, because of his sin, he basically was, I can't think of the word, but hindered, his in acting. Now, what does that? Now we took the idea that maybe David here represents the leadership of Jeff in some way, because we see that there is a misrepresentation. I don't know. I don't really know how to frame it, what Jeff did, but things are, there is a disaffection that occurs because of Jeff's retirement, right? That he hasn't done the things that he should. So even though he's come back And we could look at this reconciliation that occurred between David and Absalom. The question is, does that reconciliation sort of describe what occurred when Jeff came back? And in this case, Jeff is the one that goes into exile and comes back. I don't know. How would we look at that? Is there some other way we can frame it? I know, we have to kind of get all of these characters back into our heads, exactly what it is we're looking at. But we got Absalom, who had killed Amnon, right? He's then going to self-exile. So could Absalom represent Jeff rather than Daniel Fontenot, or have people thought about this since Thursday? Is there any way that we can sort of get back into figuring out because we didn't sort everything out. We've thrown up a lot of things to think about. And then we have, Attai and Hushai and Zadok. How do these people fit into this story? How do they fit into our history? So we got Zadok, who has the ark. He's going to take the ark. When David leaves, David sends him back. We have Ittai that wants to go with David, and David allows him to go.
And then, of course, there's one that David is surprised didn't go with him.
Which one was that?
Jonathan's son.
Okay. Where does it say that he's surprised? I don't remember.
Well, we're going to come to that.
Okay. So we haven't done that yet. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The situation that we're looking at right now, where we're dealing with Absalom, David, the different counselors, I would almost have to think that Absalom would be more representative of those that were not happy with July 18th.
Okay.
And that Ahithophel is more representative of a counselor that didn't like numbers or dates. So I'm not applying a direct name to Ahithophel at this point.
Just the American group, maybe?
Well,
or just generally those that didn't like the numbers and dates? Just never.
Generally those that don't like the numbers and dates.
Okay.
So that's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I put it out there for consideration.
Yeah. And the thing that I find, so thanks for that. Because the thing that I find difficult about this is I don't think we can really label things exactly. These more represent different attitudes or classes. Would you agree with that?
Repeat that statement, please.
So it deals more with attitudes or classes within the movement rather than specific individuals.
Yes, agreed.
And so, sometimes we try to say, well, this attitude or this person is part of that class, but they're not really the whole class, right? So then we have to look at, David being still connected to the message, like, and connected to July 18th, yet there is a failure. So that failure of David, we can connect to those that were proclaiming the message of July 18th, right? Not necessarily to July 18th itself.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That can work.
Yeah. Because David does represent July 18th on some level. And July 18th has people connected to it. And the message of July 18th has things connected to it that are not correct. One is we have the proclamation that Nashville is going to be hit by a nuclear attack by Islam on July 18th, 2020. Well, that doesn't happen. And so there's this misuse of July 18th. And so David just represents everything about July 18th in its the fact that it's anointed by God, but also the fact that it has faults, that there's problems with the July 18th study, right? That it still has to develop and grow, and there's going to be these mistakes made that Jeff has made. So he's going to make those mistakes in using July 18th. After Jeff, there's going to be the misuse of July 18th by Colin and Odilio, because they're going to try to connect the events that are happening with this immediate Sunday law, Trump bringing in the Sunday law. Then this reconciliation that happens. So first we have Amnon. He's going to, because of David's sin, so if it represents a class of people within the movement, we'd have to figure out what does Amnon represent? What error, I guess, or what character trait. So we said, well, this has to do with lust, right? And that lust in the story of Amnon is sexual lust, but there's other types of lust that it could be illustrating. And then we have Absalom, of course, after the 2 years, killing Amnon, but that was the responsibility of David to mete out that justice. And a lot of it, the anger towards Amnon, is really anger towards David, towards July 18. So then we have the rebellion of Absalom, where he's going to seek to take over the kingship from his father. And when that news comes to David, he's going to flee Jerusalem. And then we have these different characters that are mentioned: Zadok, Attai, Hushai, right? And then also we have Ahithophel, who is giving counsel to Absalom. So to me, it's kind of complex, trying to understand this story. There's just a complexity to all of these characters. And I don't think that we can just take a one-to-one comparison between individuals within the movement. They do represent different types of attitudes or classes. So, but the idea of Absalom's conspiracy, one of the things we saw, of course, when we looked at the first verse of chapter 15, was the 151, right? So this connected us. Well, it could connect us to the 15th day of the first month, but we primarily looked at it as Parminder's time setting. So the question is this a type of time setting? And the fact that he prepared him chariots and horses, what would that connect us to as a symbol? Is chariots going to connect us to Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45, verse 40 particularly? And his horse is going to connect us to the prophecies of Islam. And then we have the 50 men, right, which we have in the story of the other guy. We're also going to have chariots and horses and 50 men. What's his name? Adonijah, right? He's going to prepare him chariots, his horses, and 50 men to run before him. So basically the same thing. So another son of David is going to try the same thing at the end of David's ministry, or David's kingship. Okay, so what are the symbols there? The chariots and horses, I've kind of said it. What about the 50 men? Right, because we have this here in this story of Adonijah setting himself up as king, the son of Haggith. I will be king. He prepared him chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run before him. So we have the same language to Adonijah. Now this is going to be when David's dying, right? And Solomon's going to be made king. But Adonijah is going to be challenging Solomon. We haven't got to this story yet, but is there significance that we have the same exact wording with Absalom and Adonijah? And what would that mean? So nobody has thoughts on this? How else could we approach this? Okay, we'll go back over this again. So we got 15 verse 1, 15 verse 2. Absalom rose up early and stood beside the way of the gate. So what's the way of the gate symbolically? So we know the gate is an opening, a door, a gate, sha'ar, right? So we have a gate. This isn't the word that deals with the chiasm structure, okay? And it's the way of the gate. The word way is the going of the gate, the going in, 1870. We know that's a symbol of July 18th. So what would we do with this way of the gate? What is it symbolizing? Why is Absalom beside the way of the gate? And the word beside is interesting as well, because you have this word hand, 3027, which is a symbol of March 27th. And it's just connected to the word al, which is a preposition. It just means above or over the hand. So he stood at the hand of the going, or the going of the gate, the road of the gate, the path, the way of the gate. Shar. So what is Absalom? What is his message? He represents a message in this conspiracy. So we got symbols from Daniel 11, verse 40. We have symbols of Islam. We have symbols of 50 that we haven't really interpreted of how we would understand that. It could refer to the 50 that are left after the great disappointment. And it says there's about 50, right? So maybe it's something to do with that. And then we have the way of the gate. And he's going to, in being at the way of the gate, he's going to basically put himself in the place as the one who can give judgment, right? That the king is not addressing these issues, he can do a better job, right? So any man that had a controversy came to the king for judgment. Then Absalom called unto him and said, of what city art thou? And he said, thy servant is one of the tribes of Israel. And Absalom said to him, see, thy matters are good and right, but there is no man deputed of the king to hear thee. And I was made judge in the land, that every man which hath any suit or cause might come unto me, and I would do justice. So what is he doing spiritually? How would we characterize this behavior of Absalom? How would we see this within the movement?
Literally, he's being subversive.
Okay, yeah. But we have these symbols. I mean, is there a type of subversion that has occurred in bypassing David, which represents July 18th, and with an alternative message? And how is that done? How would what he is doing, how would that characterize what we see in the movement?
Well, in this situation, Absalom, isn't he wanting, in a way, to, at least for a while, turn back the clock? He's asking to be made judge. He's not openly saying he wants to become the king or the leader, even though his actions in having these 50 men and these horses run before him.
Yes, and now, of course, being judge, wouldn't that imply being king in this case? But he's focusing upon the fact that he would give justice to people,
Right.
not on the fact of his rule, right? So is David not doing his role of judge properly because of his sin?
Right.
Okay. Okay, but in this situation, is Absalom hearkening more back to Abimelech? Because Abimelech was never anointed, but then he wanted to become the king.
Yeah.
Saul was anointed, David was anointed, and we will see later that Solomon was anointed, and Absalom is bypassing that.
Yes. Okay. So how would we then apply that? What would be the significance of that?
In this kind of a situation, you have a party that wants to have the civil authority, but not wait for the religious blessing, if that makes sense.
Okay. And the one thing we see in David is his waiting upon God in this situation. Like, that's why I think when he flees Jerusalem, like, I think he's acting in the same way he was prior, that he's letting God take care of the situation rather than, acting. Now, we could say, well, he's weakened because of his sin. There's no doubt about that.
Would it be like Jacob and Esau? Esau didn't want to spiritual, but he wanted
The temporal.
the temporal. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, in looking at this in relation to the movement, I mean, one of the things I'm always thinking about is, can any of this apply to us? Any of these negative things? Are there things that we have done wrong in how we've dealt with what has happened in the movement? Now, my view is that I would characterize my own personal position as being a bit more passive. That is, I believe that God is in charge, and that even though sometimes we want to act, and sometimes I've done some things that are rash, I recognize that I don't know enough to figure out, human behavior and to solve all the problems. That I focus upon studying and understanding God's word, and that I see. So this is just my opinion, but I see the other people in the movement have tried to take things into their own hands, which I would say is more like Absalom, where David, he's going to act more in this passive way. Now, part of that is because of the failure of July 18th, the mistake in time setting, right? So being given a date, but misinterpreting it is what happened in our movement. So we in a sense do have, or July 18th has to wait upon God to deal with these problems because of the misuse of July 18th. And then other people continue to attack it in various ways. So to me, how Odilio addresses the mandates, it's correct. The problem is in the way that he's presenting it, and I'm not making a criticism of Odilio as a person, because I don't think it's really has to do anything with him as a person. It just has to do with how we try to fit in what was happening in the world with the idea that the Sunday law is coming soon. And so we had this correct chronology of the mandates, but the conclusion was wrong. And that is, we, in our study that we have done, because we have spent a lot of time studying and trying to understand our history, we were able, in a sense, to foresee the delays that have occurred that other people couldn't see. And we didn't predict Charlie Kirk's assassination, but we did mark a structure where his assassination fits in with a timeline showing that there is this work that has to be done prior to the Sunday law. And so Absalom, in taking things into his own hands, he's not connected with God. He's not trusting in God to address the issues. I guess the question is, David had sinned. Now, David isn't doing everything right. He's not addressing the sin in the camp, so to speak, when Amnon commits incest. Now, what could Absalom have done differently? What could David have done differently? What could have happened differently within the movement, and how does this story illustrate this? I guess is the question. I know it's a difficult. Now, if we take the way of the gate, that is, if we do an inclusive count of 8179, and instead of taking 1870 and adding it, just adding the 187 to the word gate, so we would have 8179 plus 187. If we count the number of inclusive days from 9/11, we come to the first day of the 5th month in 2024, which is August 6th. Does that help us in any way? So it gives us the anniversary of Hiroshima, and it gives us the first day of the 5th month. So, I'm always analyzing the numbers to try to understand the symbols. Now, Absalom rose up early every morning, right, and stood beside the way of the gate. Could Absalom be representing our studies at all in a negative sense? Could our studies be a conspiracy against July 18th? We rise up early and we use all of these symbols. Is there some way in which what we do is a conspiracy against July 18th? Does that make any sense to anybody?
No.
Okay. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I know. Proverb 8:34 is blessed is the man that heareth me. There's the difference. Hearing from God, watching daily at my gates, waiting at the posts of my doors.
Okay. So there is a way in which we can rise up early and stand by the way of the gate that would be correct. So is this then a counterfeit of
Right.
study?
That's how I see it.
Okay. So what we're doing is the correct way. What Absalom is doing is the wrong way. Now, part of it is he is trying to usurp the authority of the king, right?
He's trying to present himself as fair and just and compassionate.
Okay, well, I try to present myself as fair and just and compassionate.
But how sincere is Absalom? That's the question.
Yeah, I guess. So this is just a counterfeit of what we should be doing. So would it be, the Canadian American groups are still studying, but for the wrong reasons? Is that how we would characterize this? That this is a counterfeit. It's presenting itself as the real thing when it's not. Because we do see, the thing that I'm puzzled about with Jeff is he renounces the symbolic use of numbers. He says July 18th was completely an error, that he should never have listened to anybody. And yet, he's going to still keep July 18th as the first disappointment. And I just can't get my mind around the logic of that. Because if you're going to compare July 18th to the first disappointment, and you're saying July 18th was an error, was everything that led Miller to proclaim the end of the prophetic periods then error, right? Like, I don't see the parallel. I see the parallel with the first disappointment in November 9th, and that is, now a person could say, well, November 9th, 2019 was based upon Tess's, error. But the thing is, November 9th was already pointed to, right? That is, there was an error connected with November 9th, just as there was with, March 21st or April 19th in 1844. But there was a foundation that was being laid in the movement, and there was support for November 9th, 2019, based upon all of the studies that I had done. In a sense, part of the way that I looked at what happened in 2018 with time setting is, one is we weren't supposed to time set. Now, Jeff had asked me back in 2014, if all of my chronology was leading to some kind of time setting. At least that's what he was hinting at. I think he was trying to test whether I was a time setter, because I had all these dates and numbers, and maybe I was a time setter back in 2014. And I definitely was not. So I told him, no, I don't bring any of these dates into the future. Now, when time setting was introduced into the movement in 2018, I'd already done the week of Christ study, and I already had saw that we could take those dates and put them into the future, but I wasn't seeking to do that. And when Jeff introduced the idea that we're going to be setting dates, in my mind, it was, well, this week of Christ study, I do have dates in the future. How would we do that? And then I'm going to do a presentation regarding Judas' betrayal, being the 12th day of the first month, and marking that as 2019. That's before Tess does her presentation about November 9th. And, so I'm going to actually have like April 8th, 2019 as this Judas betrayal. So anyway, I'm just kind of babbling here a little bit, but in trying to sort through what happened in 2019, we can see that there's all of this evidence that points to November 9th, 2019. The 777 days before November 9th, 2019. I've done a lot of statistical analysis about these dates and the probability and the events that happened prior, and the symbols connected with what I was doing in study of the prophetic periods in the Old Testament, that November 9th is attested to, as is July 18, 2020. Jeff doesn't want to have anything to do with November 9th, 2019. And yet he attributes the same type of error to July 18th, and yet he retains July 18th. So to me, as we look at this story, it is kind of a confusing story exactly to understand who or what each of these people symbolize. But we can see that there is a conspiracy in the movement that's parallel to Absalom's conspiracy that is meant to undermine July 18th. And it uses a lot of the symbols, the numerical symbols, even at the time that it's renouncing their significance. Would we agree with that? You know, Jeff has renounced the symbolic use of numbers, yet still uses symbolic use of numbers whenever it suits him, right? The people who have followed some of Jeff's stuff, he's still going to be using those symbolic use of numbers. Still has July 18th, he still retains them. Does anybody know what Jeff says about Ezra 7:9? Is that one of the main things he has rejected, the symbolic use of dates? That hasn't been clear to me. It hasn't been really clear to me from the things that I've seen. I don't think he's actually addressed it in any of the things I've read or any of the things I've watched. But I sort of have a feeling that that is one of the main things he rejected, because that's going to come in 2013, right? And he talks about everything that came after 2012 as error. It came from other people. And that's going to be, to me, Ezra 7:9 is the first thing that comes into the movement that really has nothing to do with Jeff. I mean, sure, there's other things that Jeff studied and you know, like the 2520, things came from other people introduced them to him. But in Ezra 7:9, Jeff doesn't really have control or even the full understanding of what Ezra 7:9 is about. It sort of gets out of control, right? Would people agree with that? Because Ezra 7:9 does explode into all of the symbolic use of dates. And without Ezra 7:9, we don't have July 18th, 2020. There is a logical connection between them, right? So I'm still not sure. You know, I've puzzled over this, how we would take this whole story and fit it. You know, I think it will come with time. But let's look at chapter 16. Let's go there. We'll come back to chapter 15. When David was a little past the top of the hill, behold, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him with a couple of asses saddled, upon them 200 loaves of bread, and 100 bunches of raisins, and 100 of summer fruits, and a bottle of wine. So what do we see here? There's lots we see here, right? Okay, what is the bottle of wine?
Doctrine.
Okay, so we got doctrine. Now we got the raisins and summer fruits. And we also have 200 loaves of bread. So you got 200 of loaves of bread, 100 bunches of raisins. So that is a bunch of grapes that's been dried, right? And 100 of summer fruits. So whether that's I just think that'd be individual fruits, whatever they are. So that should be fruit should be no, this is chayotes, a harvest of the crop, whether a product of grain or fruit. Okay. So I'm not sure why they translated it as summer fruits. So 100 of something of the harvest. And even the bunches of raisins, it's just a cake of dried grapes, bunch or a cluster of raisins. Of course, lechem for bread, yayin for wine. You got a bottle of it. That is a skin bag for liquids. So just one bag of wine. Okay. Now he's on with a couple of asses. So here you got 6776. That is a pair of asses. So that's going to be a male ass, Camor, right? And it's also saddled, right? So that saddled, it's wrapped. It's got a wrapping on it with this load. So we would have a symbol there for Islam, but we also have these loaves of bread, these raisins, the summer fruits, and the bottle of wine. Okay.
This is somewhat like 1 Samuel 10, 2-4.
Yes.
Passes bread and wine there.
Yeah, yeah. So it goes back, and that is the story dealing with Saul, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Saul and Samuel.
But
Yeah.
what about the time that David was met by Abigail? What did she take to him?
Ah, great point.
okay, what did she take?
Well,
Where's that?
I'm getting to it right now.
Verse 18, 1 Samuel 25.
Okay. Yeah, because she took 200 loaves, 2 bottles of wine, 5 sheep ready dressed, and 5 measures of parched corn, 100 clusters of raisins, 200 cakes of figs, and laid them on asses.
Mhm.
So Abigail is recognizing that David is the anointed.
Mhm.
Ziba, who is the servant of Mephibosheth, is also going to honor David, but is honoring him as king, not just anointed.
Mhm. Okay. We'll
But
keep those things in the back of our mind. Anyway,
Ziba,
you got another thought?
Ziba came directly to David. Abigail sent servants first and came after the servants.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the king said unto Ziba, what meanest thou by these? And Ziba said, the asses be for the king's household to ride on, and the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine, that such as be faint in the wilderness may drink. And the king said, where is thy master's son? And Ziba said unto the king, behold, he abideth at Jerusalem, for he said, today shall the house of Israel restore me to the kingdom of my father. Then said the king to Ziba, behold, thine are all that pertained unto Mephibosheth. And Ziba said, I humbly beseech thee that I may find grace in thy sight, my lord, O king. Okay, so what's happening here with Mephibosheth?
Later,
Go ahead.
I'm just saying later on, he says he was deceived.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, we're going to see that. And when King David came to Bahurim, behold, thence came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. He came forth and cursed still as he came. And he cast stones at David and at all the servants of King David, and all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. And thus said Shimei when he cursed, come out, thou bloody man, and thou man of Belial. The Lord hath returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead thou hast reigned. And the Lord hath delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom thy son. And behold, thou art taken in thy mischief, because thou art a bloody man. Then said Abishai the son of Zeruiah unto the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over, and I pray thee, and take off his head. And the king said, what have I to do with you, ye sons of Zeruiah? So let him curse, because the Lord hath said unto him, curse David. Who shall then say, wherefore hast thou done so? And David said to Abishai and to all his servants, behold, my son, which came forth of my bowels and seeketh my life, how much more now may this Benjamite do it? Let him alone, and let him curse, for the Lord hath bidden him. And it may be that the Lord will look on mine affliction, and the Lord will require me good for his cursing this day. As David and his men went by the way, Shimei went along on the hillside over against him, and cursed as he went, and threw stones at him, and cast dust. And the king and all the people that were with him came weary, and refreshed themselves there. And Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him. And it came to pass, when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, was come unto Absalom, that Hushai said unto Absalom, God save the king, God save the king. And Absalom said to Hushai, Is this thy kindness to thy friend? Why wentest thou not with thy friend? And Hushai said unto Absalom, Nay, but whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel choose, his will I be, and with him will I abide. And again, whom shall I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son? As I have served in thy father's presence, so will I be in thy presence. Then said Absalom to Ahithophel, Give counsel among you what we shall do. And Ahithophel said unto Absalom, Go in unto thy father's concubines, which he hath left, to keep the house, and all Israel shall hear that thou art abhorred of thy father. Then shall the hands of all that are with thee be strong. They spread Absalom a tent upon the top of the house of Absalom, upon the top of the house, and Absalom went in unto his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. And the counsel of Ahithophel, which he counseled in those days, was if a man had inquired at the oracle of God. So was all the counsel of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom. Okay, so there's lots to the story I don't understand yet. So anyway, the idea here with, okay, so what's happening so far in this chapter? Any way that we can look at this?
Okay, you have the servant of Mephibosheth approaching David. Now the question is he being honest or is he being dishonest? And we're going to have to resolve that in the following chapters. Shimei curses David because he views that the house of Saul should have remained as the ruling family.
Yeah.
So my question here is Shimei's curse of David equal to a group basically saying that the rejection of July 18th is correct?
Okay, ask that again.
Well, okay, the point right now is that Shimei is looking to curse David. He believes David is a usurper. He believes that the house of Saul should have remained as the ruling family in Israel. Now, the only part of the ruling family that remains is, of course, Mephibosheth and the sons of Saul's concubines.
Okay.
Now, is Shimei representing those that rejected July 18th and is rejecting July 18th because they wish nothing more to do with the numbers or dates?
Yeah, well, okay. Now, there were people that never accepted July 18th.
That's true.
But were on the fringes of the movement, right?
Correct.
They didn't like the time setting at all. They didn't like November 9th. They didn't like July 18th. Many of those have come back to Jeff since then. Not all of them, but some. So it could represent that class. Because I would think that Shimei probably never accepted David.
Well, at that point, David was he was not accepting David. Whether or not he is honest later is going to be something to be resolved.
Okay. Yeah. Now, well, getting back, because we haven't got to, but David is going to make this judgment regarding Ziba, giving him all of Mephibosheth's property, right? Yet he doesn't examine it, right? He doesn't question. He just accepts what Ziba says, right? So he believes this fabrication. He doesn't take the time to investigate. Now that kind of reminds me of Jeff, because that's what Jeff did all the time. He would hear reports and just make a quick judgment about it without investigation. Where that just represents this spirit that still exists, but David here is shown doing this, right? So there are things about David that remind me of Jeff. Okay, and then we have the story with Ziba. So this mocking of David that happens. But in this case, it would have to be July 18th. Now we also have his curse, which is thou art a bloody man, thou bloody man, and thou man of Belial. Well, the word bloody, we see 1818. We know that that's a symbol. And we saw it, well, one is the first primary symbol is 1818, when Miller first proclaims that in about 25 years hence, the history of the world is going to be all tied up, right? But we also know that we had that 1818 years from the ark door closing on the 10th day of the 7th month to Ezekiel's 10th day of the 7th month in Ezekiel 40. So that 1818 connects there. We also have Shimei, he says, when he cursed, come out, come out. So what does that remind us of?
The doubling.
Yeah. Babylon has fallen, come out of her, my people. It's a doubling. It's the second angel's message. So, Shimei is giving this in his curse. Now David is going to accept this cursing, right? Why does he do that? Why does he accept it? He's saying the Lord has said unto him, curse David. And Zeruiah, he's going to, or it says Abishai, the son of Zeruiah unto the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over, I pray thee, and take off his head, right? So it's Abishai who says this. And the king said, what have I to do with you, ye sons of Zeruiah? So let him curse. So
These are all David's nephews, aren't they?
Yep.
Yeah. But we got Abishai, and he's gonna include them in a class.
Well, all of the different nephews of his sister come up with different things that David should always be doing, and it always frustrates him.
Okay, that's interesting. So why does David accept this cursing as from God?
He can see the sword is being used in his household, just like the prophet had warned him.
Yeah, so he's taking them as judgments from God, what has happened. Right. And so this curse then. So again, it shows David's dependence upon God and trusting that God is in this judgment, that it's from God and because of his sin. Yes, Stephen?
Sorry.
Stephen, yeah, go on.
It's just, it wasn't me, just I made a noise. I forgot I was on, I didn't have mute.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I'm not really super familiar with all these stories here, right? So, I probably should read ahead, try to figure it all out first, but I don't. I just like to go through these sort of fresh, looking at this the first time with everyone else. Okay, so David accepts this as a judgment from God, one of the judgments about the sword not departing from his house. Now he's going to be throwing stones at him and casting dust. And when the king and all the people that were with him came weary and refreshed themselves there. So refresh themselves where specifically? Bahurim? Is that the place? Young man's village is what Bahurim means. A town in Benjamin between Jerusalem and Jericho, beyond the Mount of Olives on the way to Jericho. So they're on the way to Jericho, and they stop at this Bahurim. So it's just a plural of young men. Okay. So they're going to refresh them there. Okay. Refresh themselves there. So then you're going to have Absalom come to Jerusalem. All the people and the men of Israel came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him. Now, Hushai is there, right? And so Absalom questions Hushai basically where his loyalty lies. He says, I'll choose to be wherever the men of Israel choose, right? And then Absalom's going to seek counsel from Ahithophel. So what's the purpose of this counsel of Ahithophel? What is he trying to do with this counsel to Absalom?
Isn't he trying to embarrass David?
Yes, but also isn't it to drive even a further wedge between Absalom and David?
Well, when you get down to who Ahithophel is,
Yeah.
it becomes a little bit more that he is yet not very happy with David for marrying his granddaughter.
Okay.
Because isn't Ahithophel the grandfather of Bathsheba?
Yeah, the grandfather of Bathsheba, who joined Absalom in revolt against David and committed suicide when Absalom did not heed his counsel.
But he did heed his counsel.
Well, there's a later counsel, I believe.
Okay, but Ahithophel comes to recognize that the counsel that he's given, where he tells Absalom to go into his father's concubines, is now going to result in Absalom not being really the leader that he thought he would be. Because Absalom, in committing murder, especially premeditated murder, should have been put to death.
Yeah.
In going in to his father's concubines, he was no different than Reuben, because when Reuben went into his stepmother, he lost the benefits of the firstborn. And since at this point, Absalom would have been considered the eldest son, wouldn't he have been the one next in line to have inherited the kingdom?
Okay.
So you have Ahithophel and Hushai that are now being seen as counselors to Absalom. Ahithophel is giving one class of advice. Hushai is countermanding this subtly.
Okay, so we got three different people here that are introduced specifically in the context of David fleeing Jerusalem and Absalom taking Jerusalem, right? So we have the story of Ziba, where Ziba, he's going to be representing a false witness for personal gain, right?
All right, yes.
And then we have Shimei. He's going to try, he's an accuser, right? Bringing up past history, which really isn't relevant. The house of Saul's not relevant. But and then you have Ahithophel's counsel, which I think that he's, he can represent policy, man's wisdom, and it seems that it's meant to discredit the movement through this public act, this shameful act. So, yeah, okay, yeah. There's lots here. Now we're going to have. Where are we going to have the? Well, let's read on a bit here, because this is still all part of a similar. We're going to have to come back to this tomorrow, obviously. So moreover, Ahithophel said unto Absalom, let me now choose 12,000 men, and I will arise and pursue after David this night. And I will come upon him while he is weary and weak-handed, and make him afraid. And all the people that are with him shall flee, and I will smite the king only. And I will bring back all the people unto thee, the man whom thou seekest, as if all returned, so all the people shall be in peace. And the elders pleased Absalom well, or the saying pleased Absalom well, and all the elders of Israel. Then said Absalom, call now Hushai the Archite also, and let us hear likewise what he saith. And when Hushai was come unto Absalom, Absalom spake unto him, saying, Ahithophel hath spoken after this manner. Shall we do after his saying? If not, speak thou. And Hushai said unto Absalom, the counsel that Ahithophel hath given is not good at this time. For said Hushai, thou knowest thy father and his men, that they be mighty men, and they be chafed in their minds as a bear robbed of her whelps in the field. And thy father is a man of war, and will not lodge with the people. Behold, he is hid now in some pit, or in some other place. And it will come to pass, when some of them be overthrown at the first, that whosoever heareth it will say, there is a slaughter among the people that follow Absalom. And he also that is valiant, whose heart is as the heart of a lion, shall utterly melt. For all Israel knoweth that thy father is a mighty man, and they which be with him are valiant men. Therefore I counsel that all Israel be generally gathered unto thee, from Dan even to Beersheba, as the sand that is by the sea for multitude, and that thou go to battle in thine own person. So shall we come upon him in some place where he shall be found, and we will light upon him as the dew falleth on the ground. And of him and all the men that are with him there shall not be left so much as one. Moreover, if he be gotten into the city, then shall all Israel bring ropes to that city, and we will draw it into the river, until there be not one small stone found there. And Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the counsel of Hushai the Archite is better than the counsel of Ahithophel. For the Lord had appointed to defeat the good counsel of Ahithophel, to the intent that the Lord might bring evil upon Absalom. Then said Hushai unto Zadok and to Abiathar the priests, thus and thus did Ahithophel counsel Absalom and the elders of Israel, and thus have I counseled. Now therefore send quickly and tell David, saying, lodge not this night in the plains of the wilderness, but speedily pass over, lest the king be swallowed up, and all the people that are with him. Now Jonathan and Ahimaaz stayed by in Rogel, for they might not be seen to come into the city. And a wench went and told them, and they went and told King David. Nevertheless, a lad saw them and told Absalom, but they went both of them away quickly, and came to a man's house in Bahurim, which had a well in his court, whither they went down. And the woman took and spread a covering over the well's mouth, and spread ground corn thereon, and the thing was not known. And when Absalom's servants came to the woman to the house, they said, where is Ahimaaz and Jonathan? And the woman said unto them, they be gone over the brook of water. And when they had sought and could not find them, they returned to Jerusalem. And it came to pass after they were departed, that they came up out of the well, and went and told King David, and said unto David, arise and pass quickly over the water, for thus hath Ahithophel counseled against you. And David arose and all the people that were with him, and they passed over Jordan by the morning light. There lacked not one of them that was not gone over Jordan. And Ahithophel saw that the counsel was not followed. He saddled his ass and arose and gat him home to his house, to his city, and put his household in order, and hanged himself, and died, and was buried in the sepulchre of his father. Then David came to Mahanaim, and Absalom passed over Jordan, he and all the men of Israel with him. And Absalom made Amasa captain of the host instead of Joab, which Amasa was a man's son, whose name was Ithra, an Israelite, that went in to Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. So Israel and Absalom pitched in the land of Gilead. Okay, anyway, we don't have time to read all of this, but we can see that this covered the fact that this counsel that Ahithophel is going to give is going to be rejected, because in God's providence, then it's going to end in the suicide of Ahithophel. So there's tons of stuff here, but I still don't know how to sort any of this out. But any final thoughts before we close with prayer?
It's talking about him passing over the water. Is this the same Jordan that he passed over?
Well, yeah, they have to pass over the Jordan to get to Jericho, right? I mean, eventually.
Where
What's that? I think Jericho.
We'll talk about it tomorrow, but
yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Remember we was talking about him passing over the water earlier in chapter, I think it's 15 or 16. Which one is it? Top of 16? Passed over the water.
Mm-hmm.
And y'all said you didn't know which water he was passing over.
yeah, we have to figure these things out. I don't know much yet. Yeah. Okay. So let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for the study this morning and for each person that has participated. We know, Lord, that as we continue to study these things individually, we need your Holy Spirit to understand them. We're not sure what the symbols mean at this time, but we just pray that you can give us understanding. I pray that you can bless each person and be with us throughout this week. We have studies in our personal study and the studies we have together. And we pray this and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.